Born in 1957 to Jamaican parents, Dr. Leroy Logan, MBE, is a proud Londoner, a staunch Arsenal fan, an advocate for good relationships between the police and Britain's minority ethnic communities, a mentor to young people, and an advisor on knife crime. Leroy Logan is a former superintendent in the Metropolitan Police. He retired in 2013 after 30 years of service. He's also a former chair and founding member of the Black Police Association Charitable Trust. Leroy has a new book, Closing Ranks, My Life as a Cop, which will be released soon, as well as his biopic directed by Steve McQueen, featuring Star Wars actor John Boyega, who's set to take the role of Leroy Logan. Leroy, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on today's show. And how are you?
It's good to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to start off by just asking you, what is it like having a film made about your life story, which is directed by a top director like Steve McQueen, and having a Hollywood actor like John Boyega playing you?
Well, it's very surreal. It's beyond my wildest dreams to have my story picked up by Steve McQueen and put into one of his series of small acts. And as you say, John Boyega is playing me in the lead role of Red, White and Blue, which is one of the episodes of that series. So yeah. I mean, it's been a 4-year journey with Steve and John, and having seen them on set as well as being involved in the script. It's been absolutely astonishing experience. It's quite a contrast to policing, and I'm really privileged to be part of it.
How old were you when you decided that you wanted to join the police, and what led to that decision?
Well, I was quite old when I joined the police. I was 26, because I was straight after uni, I went to work at the Royal Free Hospital. I was a research scientist for a few years, and it was during that sort of experience in work at the Royal Free, I started to meet up some cops. I didn't know there were cops until they introduced themselves as such, because I used to meet them in sporting facilities, the gym, the pool, the sports hall, and even in the bar. So I saw the human side of them, and it offset a lot of my concerns about police officers, having grown up in the 60s and 70s subject to the sus law. So that was a real sort of learning for me. And then my boss was doing my annual appraisal, and he said, "Leroy, I can't see you being a cop for the next 30, 40 years, So I said, "Well, what do you think I should do?" He said, "Well, you're an outgoing person. You like interacting with the public because you do really well with patients." And I said, "Well, yeah, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, what about policing? I hear they're doing a recruiting drive, and is that something you would consider?" I said, "Do I look like a racist?" Because of my experience. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And I remember sharing that with my wife, she was my fiance at the time. And I said, "Gretel, they keep on saying that I should join the police." Because even the police officers I've been interacting at Hampstead saying, try it. And they even took me on drive rounds. So I saw the real positive sides of it. And so it was interesting. And then I had a quantum leap back to when I was at university. And I remember running from one end of the campus to the other at University of East London. And I saw a black officer in a marked vehicle, and it sort of stopped me in my tracks, literally. And I was so in admiration of him and what he was doing, just by the image of him in uniform in a marked police vehicle. And I remember that image. And then an image I had when I was in Jamaica, seeing black cops, black doctors, black nurses, teachers, etc. So it didn't have a total disconnect. I was connected in one way or another. And I pursued it and applied in the mid of '82. And they wanted me almost immediately because of that recruiting drive, especially graduates. But I said, no, it's just too early. And I decided to offset it to the middle of 1983.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
What were the early days like, and at what point did you realize there needed to be a change?
Well, it was even before I joined, because in between applying and waiting for my entry date in June of 83, my dad was beaten up by police, and I thought, no way I could join the organization that's beaten up my father, who I loved. He was my hero, you know, together with my mother. And I thought, no, put that to one side, because I saw him at the A&E when he was beaten up by those officers. And I said, well, no way I could join their ranks, especially how do I explain to my father, because he always wanted me to be a scientist and going into medicine, and then to just change tack to go into the police service, who actually beat him up. There's just no way. And I remember saying that to Gretel and my boss, and even the officers who was, you know, befriended me, and they said, listen, don't judge everyone by the same experience. There are some bad cops, but you need to really pursue it. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And I thought that's the last thing I want to do. But, you know, my father successfully sued the police service for unlawful arrest and excessive force. And I suppose his maturity and understanding, he knew that I had a real calling for it, because, you know, I was actually going against him. And it's one of the few times I actually went against him in career paths, which fortunately he supported me and took me to Hendon that first weekend before starting the foundation course in June of 83. And he always supported me, and my mother also, until they both passed away in the early O's.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. What were the, in your opinion, do you think the Metropolitan Police is still hostile, racist, and guilty of repeatedly overlooking promotion towards ethnic minorities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sad to say, because, you know, when I first joined, there was a lot of casual racism. You know, I even had a big uppercase N-word written on my locker. And I know that I was not allowed to go into certain undercover work because they overlooked me. And I realized that I had to be twice as good as my white counterparts. Because, you know, I realized that excellence is the best deterrent to push back on any sort of prejudices or any other forms of inequalities. So I knew that there was massive cultural and systemic failures I had to fight against. But I suppose the amazing thing was, you know, even when I was at Hendon, we had a network of officers, because we all joined at the same time because of this recruiting drive, and we kept together. And in fact, most of us were the founder members of the Black Police Association. In 1994, we launched in September of that year, and it really showed us that we had to stand up against these systemic failures and speak up on behalf of other minority staff, and also speak up on behalf of the Black community, which was going through a lot of systemic failures in terms of stop and search and excessive use of force.
And that was following the Stephen Lawrence murder as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was our coming out party, one of a better expression, because we had to say it as it is, that the Met Police was institutionally racist. And we showed evidence internally how Black officers are held back and disproportionately investigated compared to white counterparts. And obviously we highlighted the terrible examples of policing when it came to Black communities. But we saw that we couldn't just point the finger, because we had 3 fingers pointing back at us saying what we're going to do. So we took ownership of the internal recruitment retention, progression, performance indicators to improve the working environment of Black officers, and also how we improve the investigation of hate crimes through strategic investigating officers and building up on our role to be like a critical friend for the organization. And we continued with that, especially working with the Stephen Lawrence Steering Group, which was the independent oversight group, to make sure that they monitored the progress of the McPherson recommendations, because what gets measured gets done. And we saw that they were definitely needing that independent oversight. And we continued to ensure that we had the ownership of it. And unfortunately, in 2009, the Stephen Lawrence Steering Group was dissolved, and the new government, Conservative government, took over in 2010 and brought in austerity. And that combination of change of government emphasis and austerity meant that a lot of the race and equality issues were being sidelined, and the independent oversight was eroded, and police officers, or police chief constables rather, were marking their own homework around race and equality issues. And unfortunately, it's led us to this position where the whole look and feel of policing reminds me of a pre-McPherson era, and how, the aggressive type of policing has been very, very consistent, using cuffs and stop and search, using tasers on compliance. You see lots of WhatsApp and YouTube videos of over excessive force by officers. And as a result of that, the impact on trust in the police, especially for the Black community, is at an all-time low. And then you've got the commissioner saying institutional racism is not an appropriate term, and she says that trust and confidence, in police, especially for the Black community, is good when, and it's just undermining people's intelligence to say all is well, because it's far from it.
Was the Met Police right in closing the Stephen Lawrence case?
No, especially at this time with Black Lives Matter. It should have been done. I actually tweeted to Commissioner saying, it's a crazy decision, especially in this Black Lives Matter movement. And you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to even mention you're going to do it. Even if you want to downsize the team, you can do that without making a big press claim about it, or, big publicity approach. For me, it was a real gut-wrenching experience for the Lawrence family, and of course the wider Black community. And that just shows for me that she's out of touch, and not the sort of person that I was working with 20 years ago when she came back to the Met as a commander, working with myself and other BPM members, and her boss John Greaves, who was like the Met Police lead in the McPherson recommendations. And she seemed to be walking the talk then, but she's definitely not walking the talk now.
Yeah. There's so much that's going on at the moment. I mean, even with the Black Lives Matter, we can discuss about this, all day long. But things such as the stop and search, does that really work, or does it just discriminate against the certain ethnic groups, especially young Black men?
Stop and search is a good tool, but all the same, it's a blunt tool. But it's sharpened up by community intelligence. The information comes from the community. So if their experience of policing is very heavy-handed and they feel over-policed and under-protected, they're not going to trust the police, and they're definitely not going to give them the information that the officers need to target the real criminals, the ones who are carrying the knives and the guns and carrying the drugs and spreading them around, whether it's on county lines or locally. So you need to ensure that those critical encounters of stop and search and Section 60 roadblocks are as positive as possible, treat people with respect and dignity, and not this excessive use of force. And hopefully, you'll get some real benefits that you can go back to the community and say, because you trust us, we're able to reduce the fear of crime and make the streets more safe and secure. So that, for me, isn't happening. And of course, we see that there's a disconnect between the police and the black community. In fact, there was a Home Affairs Select Committee meeting saying that the police run the risk of being irrelevant for certain communities, especially black young men and women, because the heavy-handed experience and their concerns about being over-policed and underprotected means that they're not going to go to police, to report crimes. They're not going to make statements or go on an ID parade or even go to court and give evidence. So there is a massive gap in the army of the police when you don't have people willing to speak up and speak up to ensure we get convictions. And if that's the case, then the whole jurisprudence is being compromised. And I would like to think that the police have to acknowledge that there's a problem and show clear statements of intent and a narrative saying there is a problem, we have systemic failures, we don't have the leadership we should have, and we're going to do something about it. And until such time they do that, we're going to be talking about this issue maybe another 20 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that, to secure change, people from those communities will have to penetrate the system and change it from within. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, because obviously, the impact that you've made, I mean, just using you as an example, some of the policies that have come out, had it not been for officers like yourself who were able to give at least that advice and to help change the way the system is, that would not have happened had you not been in that position. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you can't steer a ship from the shore. You've got to be on board in the captain's cabin to change the direction of that ship. The police service is like a massive oil tanker. It takes time to move it around. And you have to know why it does certain things. And that's why I wrote the book, to give people a sort of lens into the culture and the type of people attracted to policing, and how, you can easily assimilate into the norms and values of that and become a clone, and in a similar sense of denial. Whereas maybe because I was a bit older, I was more mature, clear on my values, I integrated, wanting to bring in my beliefs and values, because I think that could enrich the police. And, for me, I made clear from the beginning, I'm a black man who happens to be a cop, not the opposite. And so in retirement, I'm still a black man, and keeping my beliefs and values and being part of the black community is very important. So those are the sort of things we've got to get to grips with to ensure that we have a police service fit for purpose and not an occupying force.
Now, you mentioned your book there. Can you tell us when this book is being released, and also how we can get hold of this?
Yeah, the book was released last week on the 17th of September, and it's called Closing Ranks. It's available at any quality good bookshops or online, so it's on Amazon. It's also Waterstones and other outlets, plus SPCK, the publishers, they have it online as well. And you can go on ll@leroylogan.com, my website. Again, you can register your interest and we can get books out to you. So it's already getting a lot of positive goodwill, and I'm really pleased how the response has been. I would like to think that will continue, especially leading up to the Small Axe series and John Boyega playing me in the Red, White and Blue episode of it. So I'm very hopeful that the momentum will continue, because the movement of the Black Lives Matter movement is really, for me, a time for everyone, regardless of background and culture or experience, for us, everyone to come together and say, listen, address these issues. And we're starting to see it with, organizations declaring their interest in slavery and statues being replaced. I don't condone violence or criminality and pulling them down, but changing the whole emphasis, taking them down and replacing them with positive images and replacing buildings with positive names. So I'm really pleased to see how that's happening the length and breadth of the country, and I would like to think it will continue.
Leroy, thank you so much for being that clear voice in the midst of all this chaos that's going on at the moment. There's so much fear, anxiety, and worry, and just to have somebody like you with that reassuring voice, just to tell us that, if we can take proactive actions, we can secure change. And being that bridge between the police and also the Black community, and being able to bring these two different groups together in a way that only you can do that, and to try and start a conversation and try and change the way things are at the moment. And, I just want to honor you for that and say thank you so much. And I wish you all the best with everything that you do.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate those kind words. And, for me, I just want to make sure that my grandchildren's generation doesn't go through the same inequalities and injustices as my children's generation and even my generation. And that's what keeps me committed to the cause, and, a real desire to see changes. And I just hope we'll see that sooner rather than later. But, the struggle continues, but it's good to struggle. And, I'm just so glad that so many people identify with it, and it's people power, and we need to galvanize people to make those changes. So thank you very much to share my thoughts, and hopefully we'll see the fruits of our labors.